Hola mis amores, welcome back to another video. My name is Vanessa and welcome to my book space. Today's video is going to be a fun one. We are going to be ranking all of the books that I have read in the first half of 2026. Now I'm not going to do all of the books in one video because that would be a very long ass video. I have read 72 books. I am going to break up my reading recap into videos. This one is going to be all of the fiction books that I've read, and then in the second video I will be doing my nonfiction books in case you are a fan of nonfiction like I am. If you're new here, because I know that there's a lot of new faces, thank you for subscribing. Yes. But if you're new here, I picked up reading again in February of 2026. I have always been an avid reader, but you know, I started having kids, became a mom, and then reading became second to everything, if not last to everything that was going on in my life. So I put reading on the back burner is essentially what I'm trying to say. And I haven't picked up a book in like 10, 15 years until 2026. So since February of 2026 up until now, I have read 72 books. I have not stopped reading. I forgot how much I love books. I love reading. So I started off this year reading a whole lot of genre thrillers, commercial thrillers, popcorn thrillers, most of them exclusively written by white authors. Like my reading interests at the beginning of the year were absolutely brutal. And I'm not trying to be on a soapbox or anything, but I really am trying to diversify my reading and ensure that I am reading as diversely as possible. And so you will see the more and more we get into the list, things start getting a little bit diverse, okay? I had 60 NFs, okay? I had 60 NFs. Here they are. It's also summertime, so my kids are home. So let's hope that they don't barge in and completely obstruct the course of this video. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into the ranking. I'm going to be ranking them from least favorite to most favorite. If I'm looking off to my right or to your left, it's because my list is there. Okay, so I'm looking at my list of books, and yeah, let's do this. Let's get into it. Okay, so right off the bat, I'm going to say that my bottom three books of 2026 so far were these three commercial thrillers. I have spoken about all three of these books in a separate video. You can go ahead and take a look. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time with them. But coming in at number 42 is The Perfect Marriage. This was actually my first one-star read, and I definitely don't recommend reading that one. Coming in at number 41, I have It's Not Her by Mary Kubica. This was legitimately one of the worst books that I've read this year, if not my entire life. It wasn't enjoyable. A lot of suspense, did not have any payoff whatsoever. It's kind of a whodunit mystery of sorts. I just didn't enjoy this one. Razorblade Tears is one that I unfortunately did not have a good time with at all. It comes in at number 40. Okay, coming in at number 39, we have The Whispers by Ashley Audrain. I really wanted Ashley Audrain to be an auto-buy author for me because I absolutely love The Push, and I was expecting to get my socks blown off with The Whispers, but it just felt very recycled. It is very similar in plot and nature to The Push, which was very disappointing because I wanted to read something fresh and new from this author. It's one of those books that's set in suburbia, and we're really getting, you know, truth versus reality, motherhood, neighborhood rivalry. I mean, there is a lot going on, but it just all felt very shallow and very surface level, and again, very much recycled. If you've read The Push, there is no need literally to read The Whispers. Number 38, we have Piglet. I did not like this book at all, which is very hard to say because I tend to gravitate towards books that have food as a central theme. Disordered eating, eating disorders, those are things that I do like reading about. And in Piglet, that's exactly what we're getting, right? Our main character has always had a very complicated relationship with food. She's weak away from her wedding, and weeks before her wedding, her fiance confesses to the ultimate betrayal, and then as a result, her relationship with food absolutely spirals. So once again, it's one of those books that on paper sounds exactly like something that I would want to read, but stylistically it didn't work for me. The entire book is told almost exclusively through the perspective of food. The description of food is very opulent and rich, and that's fine, but there's literally almost no dialogue. And then on top of that, we don't come to find out what the ultimate betrayal is. Like, what did her fiance do? Now, I get that that wasn't the point of the book, but It felt very cheap because I wanted to DNF the book, but I didn't because I thought we were going to find out what in the hell her fiance did, and we never came to find out. So for all of those reasons, it comes in at number 38. This one just didn't work for me. At number 37, we have Dear Debbie, another book that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on because, again, I do have a video talking about all of those popcorn commercial thrillers. What I'm going to say is that Frida McFadden is not an author that I'm ever going to read again. She's just not for me. Okay, it's just not for me, but there are plenty of people that like Frida McFadden, so you might actually enjoy her books. They're very quick, very easy to get through. I mean, I did enjoy reading it, but it's not a book that's going to stick with me for long. It's one of those books that, you know, you're going to give a quick read and not think much of it. Very forgettable book in my opinion, so it does come in at number 37. So next up I have Whidbey or Whidbey. This one is by Takira Madden, and I really wanted to love this book because, again, it's one of those books that on paper sounds like everything that I would want in a book. We are following along 3 women. These 3 women are all interconnected to one serial pedophile. One of those women is actually his mom. At the beginning of the book, this pedophile, this abuser, ends up dead. He has gone to jail and he ends up dead. And so the book really is about, you know, these 3 women and their lives as they have to navigate healing and grief and trauma following the death of this abuser. So truly, it's a psychological exploration on the impact of abuse and the impact of childhood sexual abuse primarily. So it sounds like everything that I would want in a book. It is a new release as well. So highly anticipated. It is by an Indigenous author as well. For me, there was a problem in terms of the characterization. I wasn't able to fall in love with the characters. I wasn't able to truly care and be empathetic towards their journey. Also, there were no quotation marks around the dialogue. I don't know why that choice was made stylistically. Like, I tried to look into it, but I just don't know. And then they were introduced like towards the end of the book. So for like 75 to 80% of the book, you are getting 0 quotation marks around the dialogue. And that completely took me out of the book and made it very hard to follow. It just felt very disjointed. The narrative didn't feel like it flowed well. And yeah, the absence of quotation marks was just a very weird choice for me, like in my opinion. But take a crack at it. I know that there's some people who really, really liked the book. So try it, read it, see how you liked it. Personally, it was a miss for me. Coming in at number 35, My Husband's Wife, another book that I spoke about in this video right here. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. Also, it's a very popular new release or, you know, popular 2026 release. So I feel like a lot of people know about this book, know what this book is about. For me, it didn't work. It feels like with this book, the author was just trying to throw things at the wall to see what stuck. Ultimately, nothing did. Also, there were so many plot twists. It just got so like confusing and just all over the place. Way too convoluted of a plot, way too ambitious as well. I feel like the more sci-fi elements of this book were absolutely unnecessary. I mean, overall, just not an enjoyable book. I had high hopes for this one and I just didn't like it. So that's why I came in at number 35. At number 34, I have I Who Have Never Known Men. Now, this book went super viral on TikTok about 2-3 months ago, and I can understand why a lot of people like this book. At the center of it all, we have 39 women, plus our unnamed narrator. They are stuck in this mysterious bunker underground, and they are constantly under watch and surveillance and controlled by these brutal, brutal guards. They're all stuck in this one bunker, but they're not able to touch each other. They're not able to have dialogue with one another. None of these women can remember how they got to this bunker, and none of them seem to remember life before the bunker. So by all accounts, a super interesting premise. They do get a chance to escape this bunker, and once they come out, they attempt to build a new world, a new community without men. And for the most part, it does have something meaningful to say in terms of meaning and self-understanding, and it is very dystopian in nature, and it is very suspenseful. It carries that tonality of existential dread, and it's very bleak, and so it's very atmospheric. It's going to give you all of the vibes, if you will. I even found it incredibly feminist. I didn't mind that we didn't get any answers. I know that some critics of the book have said, hey, we don't get any answers as to why these women are in this underground bunker. That I didn't mind, but I just wasn't able to connect with the characters. I was reading the book in this detached way, and I was like, hey, what's going on? Because I know that this book is supposed to be good, but I do think that it's worthwhile looking into the backstory of the author. Jacqueline Hartman was born in Belgium prior to World War II, and she did escape to Morocco, I believe, during the war, and then she did return to Belgium after the war. And so once I found that out, I was like, well, I do see the connection between the Holocaust and all of the dystopian themes in the book, and what the book is trying to say about the cruelty of lacking information, lacking meaning, and the meaning of life, and also trying to reconstruct your life following something as apocalyptic as the Holocaust. So definitely very thematically rich. I just wish that I cared about the characters a little bit more. I gave the 33rd spot to Scarborough. This one is by Catherine Hernandez. She is a queer Canadian author. Now, in case you didn't know, I am originally from the GTA, which is the Greater Toronto Area. For my American viewers, Toronto is sort of like the city, right? The Canadian city. And then all around it, there's separate boroughs and towns and cities that are very adjacent to Toronto, but not necessarily considered Toronto. And Scarborough is a very culturally diverse, culturally rich community. And it's a beautiful community that's often misunderstood because there are pockets of poverty, crime, and all of the social ills that you can think of. And so when I saw the book, I was so excited. It reads like a love letter to anyone from Toronto. I think the Canadian media struggles from being very safe. And that's my issue with this book in particular. It just felt very safe. We're talking about Scarborough here, okay? And there's some very gritty areas in Scarborough, you know, and this book just failed to really pack that punch. We're following along members of a Scarborough neighborhood, Scarborough community, and the majority of these members are BIPOC folk. So they are dealing with racism and poverty and class and all the things that you can imagine. But none of those themes are explored in a way that has anything new to say. I don't know. I feel like this book is one of those books that just felt very safe. But if you are Canadian, I recommend reading it just for the context of what life looks like for marginalized folks in a place like Scarborough. At number 32, I have The Attic Child. This was another highly, highly anticipated read. A lot of people whose opinion I trust recommend this book quite a bit, and I didn't love it. The Attic Child follows two separate kids who are stuck in the same attic about almost a century apart or in different timelines altogether. The first child is Dikembe / Celestine. He is a young boy that is essentially sold into domestic servitude. He arrives in England. He is a domestic servant, and at first things are really, really good, which was somewhat weird because the way that the author almost pacifies that dynamic between his master and Dikembe, who is his servant, the author almost makes it like they formed this inseparable bond, and his master was incredibly, you know, kind to him. And I just hate those narratives to begin with. And then we are following Laura in the second timeline, in the second POV. She is an orphan child. Her parents recently died, and she is left in the hands of an abusive caregiver. And that abusive caregiver ends up locking her in the same attic that Dikembe was locked in about 100 years ago. And so they're united by this one family secret. They're also united by this attic. Dikembe leaves things behind that Laura then finds. And there's also a mystery, like a family mystery interconnecting them. I mean, there's a lot going on. In fact, I did feel like the book went on for way too long. It just reads like the concept itself wasn't thought out thoroughly. The writing lacks a bit as well. Also, Laura's POV isn't something that I was interested in at all. I was much more invested in Dikembe's storyline for sure. So yeah, that one came in at number 32. At number 31, we have Always Lived in the Castle. Another highly anticipated read, recommended often by lovers of thrillers and horrors and whatnot. And this one reads a little bit like a fairy tale. We have a family that essentially has been ousted from their community because, you know, one of the kids poisoned the entire family. Only 3 members of the family survived. And now they're living in complete alienation and isolation in this house that's in a forest. It's very Beauty and the Beast esque, but just not as charming. Nothing happens in this one. It's very devoid of plot, which oftentimes I don't mind, but literally like nothing happens. Nothing happens. I don't know, something about this book completely went over my head. It just is not fun. It was an unfun, enjoyable read. Again, I couldn't connect with any of the characters. I could care less about, you know, both of those sisters. Two of the sisters survived the poisoning, as did their uncle. And to be honest with you, the characters were just not charming enough for me to really invest in the story. So yes, I have it at number 31. Not a fan of this one, but a lot of people do like it. So at number 30, we have Detransition Baby. I ended up reading this one for Pride Month. This one is by Tori Peters, and they are a trans author. I do recommend that everyone read this book, especially if you want to understand detransitioning, which wasn't a concept that I knew anything about. Going into this, I expected to be highly, highly educated, and I was. In a way, I really, really was. And it is an enjoyable read. The characters are easy to fall in love with. They are messy, and they are complicated, and they are complex. And what I really appreciated about Detransition Baby is that the author allows the trans characters to exist in multitudes and not exist within these binaries of good or bad. They are morally gray, they are morally complex, and I appreciated just reading about trans people existing and trying to navigate life as they attempt to construct a family that is outside of the typical cis heteronormative family structures that we all know of. But my issue with Detransition Baby and why it ranks a lot lower than I thought it would is because it's written from a very white middle class perspective. It lacks any characters of color except for Katrina. And there's just so much in that book that's very problematic. It's impossible to unpack in the 3 minutes that I'm giving each book, but it's just problematic. There's a lot of problematic ideals and views and opinions that I don't think really adds to the narrative or adds to the messaging. It's very white queer, and I just needed a little bit more color, a little bit more tension there with, you know, race and class and how all those things intersect with gender and sexual identity, and we didn't get that at all, really. Number 29 is Half His Age. This one, I can talk about this book for hours, but let me not. In Half His Age, Jeanette McCurdy writes about Waldo. We meet Waldo, hypersexualized teenager, lower class, is a compulsive shopper. She jumps from like boyfriend to boyfriend, and her life is like forever chaotic. And then she becomes obsessed with her English teacher, Mr. Corgi, and he is also written in a very weird way because on the one hand, he is supposed to be very sophisticated and well-versed in the arts and literature, and I think he's supposed to be well-traveled, but on the other hand, Jeanette McCurdy writes him as this like slimy, like slime ball who's greasy and icky and all of these things. And somehow, some way they end up, well, not somehow, some way, you know, Mr. Corgi does all of the manipulative things because he is in his 40s and she is 17. But he does all of the things and they enter into a romantic / sexual relationship. And when I say sexual, I mean sexual, okay? There's a lot of hairs, there's a lot of balls, there's period blood. It's a lot. And Jeanette McCurdy, she frames their relationship as an affair because he is married and he has a child. This one is really good if you're just looking for vibes. If you're actually looking for a book that has something to say on the process of grooming and what that can look like and its impacts, etc. and so forth, you're not really getting that here. It tackles a lot of themes, but doesn't tackle them in a way that feels like the author, Jeanette McCurdy, was actually trying to add to any conversation whatsoever. Also, I don't feel like there was a lot of separation between Jeanette McCurdy and the book itself. Waldo is essentially reheated nachos for Jeanette McCurdy. They sound exactly like the same person. If you've read her memoir and then you read Half His Age, you'll be able to see the similarities. And I just think that Jeanette McCurdy didn't allow for there to be enough distance between the character of Waldo and herself as an author. There was a lot going on here, lots of balls, lots of sex, much of which was unnecessary in my opinion. So yes, 29 goes to half his age. 28 goes to Long Shot by Kennedy Ryan. I wanted to love this book a little bit more than I did. This one is a romance. At the center, we get Iris, and she is engulfed between two rising NBA stars. One that she ultimately marries and has a baby with, but he is an abusive monster. And then her actual love interest is August West. And on paper, the father of her child seems to be all of the things. You know, he has the career, he has the looks, he has the finances. He is Prince Charming on paper. And then when she actually gets into a committed relationship with him, he becomes a monster. Now, trigger warning, trigger warning, trigger warning for this book. It is highly graphic. The depiction of violence is extreme. At times, I felt like I had to put down the book because it was a lot. And I read a lot of dark things, but that was a lot. Now, that wasn't my issue with Long Shot. August West took me out of the book a little bit. I didn't care for his POV as much as I did Iris. Also, I don't like the trope of like damsel in distress. You know, Iris is being brutalized by one man on this corner, and then her salvation is another man. I don't know. I don't read romance as it is, so that's not a trope that I particularly enjoy. So that's why it came in at number 28. And number 27 is another somewhat forgettable book. It wasn't terrible. This is My Sister, the Serial Killer. We are following two sisters, Ayula and Corday. And Corday is the older sister who's always cleaning up after her little sister, who honestly sounds like a psycho. She kills all of her boyfriends. She does it in the name of feminism or in the name of self-defense type of thing. And the serial killer part is like the least notable like thing in the book. It's very insignificant, which was sort of a bummer because the title is thus very misleading. It truly is about sibling rivalry, family loyalty. What secrets are you willing to cover up? How far are you willing to go to save and protect your family, essentially? It's also set against the backdrop of like Nigeria's socio-cultural political climate. Honestly, that part was more interesting than the serial killer part, to be honest with you. The two sisters are also bonded by family trauma. And then of course we do have the serial killer element. Things go incredibly wrong once Ayula sets her sights for the next person that she wants to kill. She sets her sights on her sister's romantic interest. So very interesting premise. It's one of those books that I just couldn't get into all of the way, but good enough for a quick read. It's also by a Black author, which I always appreciate, but nothing that blew me away, if you will. Okay, at number 26, we have The Stepford Wives. And I'm not gonna lie, I read this book because of Yesteryear. It is the most foundational, especially in more contemporary times. It's a very foundational book that a lot of like suburban thrillers, suburban literary fictions were inspired by. In Stepford Wives, we get our main character, Joanna. She essentially arrives at this picturesque neighborhood, and she arrives and all of the women are completely submissive and they do all of the things that 1950s a woman should be doing. All of the women are being replaced by all of these subservient robots. And Joanna is trying to escape this neighborhood before she also gets turned into a robot. It's like a psychological thriller. There's elements of sci-fi as well. But ultimately, Stepford Wives is a satire. It is a true satire that's making a commentary on the idealized portrait of a woman in the 1950s. It's satirizing all of those gender roles, gendered expectations. And it also serves as like a warning on technology and how far, you know, technology can go to sort of like control our lives. It's very fascinating, a classic, if you will. Overall, a good enough read. Don't expect to like completely be blown away. It was entertaining, but I wasn't like crazy about it. At number 25, I have Bunny. So we are now in the top 25 books. I have Bunny. I really enjoyed Bunny. I know that it's a very misunderstood piece of text. Mona Awad is actually an MFA graduate. And when you know that, you sort of see what she was trying to do. Bunny is very metafictional. It is a piece of metafiction, which means that it's a book that's very aware that it's a book sort of thing. It's a book that's supposed to be intentionally confusing. Reading it is like being in a fever dream, but I sort of liked it. I liked that aspect of it. It is very hallucinogenic, very feverish. The writing is very whimsical. It's very elegant. But it's essentially making fun of the writing process. We have Samantha, who's our main character, and she is in this elite MFA program, and she is like equal parts disgusted, but also intrigued by these group of girls who call themselves the Bunnies, and they end up reaching out to Samantha, who again is like disgusted but at the same time intrigued by the bunnies. They invite her to their smut salon. She ultimately decides to attend their smut salon, and she thinks she's going to go there for vibes and to hang out and to be part of the cool kids club. And then when she arrives, she comes to find out that that's essentially where they make men out of bunnies. There's so much more to it than that. I feel like Bunny is one of those books that merits and warrants an entire video because it is very complex, but in this like unserious way. The bunnies, for example, I just couldn't take them seriously. They just reminded me of like little girls, and I think that that was almost intentional, how much they're infantilized. The book is all about performative femininity, the female gaze as it relates also to the male gaze. And of course, it's making commentary on the absurdity, right, of elite MFA programs, and it's also making fun of the writing process. It is open to interpretation, and I think that that's what throws people off because there's so many theories, you know, circulating the internet till this day. There's so many themes, so many theories. It's a very complex book, but I enjoyed it. It was my introduction into weird girl lit fic, so I did rank it at number 25. Number 24 is The Girls by Emma Cline. Now, I have always wanted to love books on cults. One of the like subgenres that really intrigues me. This was a good enough introduction into like cults and how they impact women and how they can have an impact on like girlhood and womanhood. It's another one of those weird girl lit fic books, and I enjoyed it. I didn't think too much of it. In terms of cults, this one is actually a fictional retelling of the Charles Manson case. And I know a lot of people do not like how Charles Manson was sort of reimagined in this book. I know a lot of people think that it's historically inaccurate, but I don't think that the author was trying to be like accurate. I actually don't think that the book is entirely about like cults or anything like that. It really is a coming of age story. That's really what The Girls is about. And I found that the whole Charles Manson angle sort of happens on the periphery of our main character, Evie, right? So it's not like it's about Charles Manson reimagined or anything like that. It's more so Evie Boyd's journey into girlhood as she questions herself, her identity, you know, wanting to belong. There's a lot of yearning there as well. But yes, it is very reminiscent of Charles Manson. Essentially, The Girls is about Evie Boyd, who is our main character, and she is a very young teenage girl, very impressionable, and she comes from a divorced family, so she's often like alienated and isolated, and she breaks up with her best friend, and then she happens to come across these three whimsical older girls who sort of sweep her off her feet, and they lead her into this like drug-fueled, very oppressive cult, and they introduce her to the leader of the cult, who's supposed to sort of play as Charles Manson. His name is Russell, and he is all of the things that you can imagine. Trigger warning, because there are some very sensitive scenes in this book. I really liked it. I enjoyed it, and I think that cult books or books on like cults are going to be something that I'm going to be enjoying for the rest of the year. At number 23, I have Yesteryear. Now, I know that this is a very controversial take, but I enjoyed the damn book. Okay, I really liked the book. I don't think that it was worthy of all of this moral panic, all of this discussion. Now that the dust has settled and we're sort of all over the Yesteryear hype, I can come out and say that I liked the book, 1, and 2, it wasn't that deep. It felt like a girly pop book, you know, something that you're going to be able to breeze through. It feels like the perfect book club read. There's so much discussion that can be generated about the book. Of course, we're getting so many themes, right? Like reality versus truth, performance and curation and trad wife aesthetics, and the manosphere and the monetization of motherhood and monetization of family life. There's a lot to take away from the book, and people were consumed with the representation of religion, which I found to be incredibly intellectually dishonest. I wasn't crazy about the ending. The ending sort of spoiled it for me, but that aside, I really enjoyed the book. I couldn't put it down. I finished it very, very quickly. So I didn't get all of the moral panic for this book and the rage and how angry it made primarily white women. Yeah. At number 22, I have Beloved, and that's a little bit shocking. I thought that Beloved might have ranked a little bit higher. I think with Beloved, it is obviously a very, very important book, and it offers so much commentary. It's essentially slavery as horror and the idea that we can't and we shouldn't look away from the past. I do think that everyone needs to give it a read. However, I didn't necessarily enjoy my time reading Beloved. I think that if you're just getting into Toni Morrison, don't start with Beloved, like at all. I started with Beloved, which was incredibly ambitious of me, and I almost put it down. I almost DNF'd it, one, and two, I was almost completely turned off from Toni Morrison altogether. That's not to say that it's a bad book, but it is a book that you have to go into already having a feel for her writing style and her metaphors and the type of prose that she produces in order to truly get the most out of it. Try reading Beloved after you have read Recitative or The Bluest Eye, and then go into Beloved, because it's probably going to be a lot more clear. Don't be too down on yourself if you didn't understand what was going on. I didn't half of the time. I will be reading it again, and this time I will be annotating, because I just went in there with vibes. I was like, yeah, let me crack open this book and read it. You can't do that with Beloved. So that's why I ranked it at number 22, but still so good and very, very important. At number 21, I have Pretty Girls. I have spoke about Pretty Girls before. I loved it. I had a really good time with it. The only reason why it doesn't rank a little higher is because I did feel like the book went on for a little bit too long. It is a psychological thriller, a true thriller, I would say, very literary in its prose, beautifully written. Her writing style feels like butter. It's just so rich and elegant and just beautiful. You know, you're going to read the book and actually truly enjoy the reading experience, in my opinion. You know, Pretty Girls is not a quick read. It's something that sometimes you're going to have to step away from because of all of the sexual and gendered violence. It's very graphic, very explicit and gory and all of those things. So if you can't handle that, you don't have a strong stomach, then definitely don't pick up Pretty Girls. But I loved it. I'm here for the darker stuff. And it offers a very compelling and excellent look into how crime can disrupt not only a community, but it can absolutely destroy a family. And I love that, because oftentimes as, you know, consumers of true crime content, we don't really think about the ways that true crime can really, really destroy a family. For us, it's just all about consuming all of these, like, you know, horrific details without thinking that it's actually impacting real people. So Pretty Girls, I loved it. I loved it. I don't recommend reading it at night or during Halloween or with your windows and doors unlocked, but I loved it. At number 20, I have My Dark Vanessa. This one is a very popular book for a very good reason. This is a true psychological exploration on grooming and childhood sexual abuse and the long-term impact and how abuse can really affect every facet of your life. And even going deeper than that, My Dark Vanessa for me is all about how victims have to almost create alternate realities, right? Vanessa is existing in this alternate reality for the majority of the book, where she believes that the relationship that she had with her 42-year-old professor or teacher, as a 15-year-old, she has to exist in a reality where that relationship was somehow, one, consensual, and two, she has to believe that that relationship was true love in order to cope. And I just found that fascinating, right? So My Dark Vanessa is about a 15-year-old boarding school student who is manipulated into a relationship with her teacher. And she goes throughout the entire book being like perpetually connected to him, and she is unable to fully disassociate and see the relationship for what it was, even though she knows better. Jacob Strain is unfortunately so sophisticated and so good at what he does that he manages to convince Vanessa that she wants this. She's always wanted this, and this is consensual, and this is true love. He manages to convince her of that. If it's not really until another woman comes forward in her adult years with an accusation against Jacob Strain that Vanessa begins to question the true nature of that relationship. It is brilliant. I liked it a lot, and it's a popular book for a very good reason. The book sort of dragged on. It went on for a little bit too long, and there was quite a bit of filler, and some of the side characters just were very flat. But even with its shortcomings, a really good book. Definitely recommend reading it. At number 19, I have The Girls Who Grew Big. And this one is very, very good. It's a very lighthearted read, but it still has so much to say on the morality of teenage pregnancy. Layla Motley, who is the author of the book, she talks about the moralizing gaze, which is the idea that teenage moms are often looked at through the gaze of morality, and their current circumstances, with them being moms, can only be a result of terrible decisions, and thus that makes them like bad in nature, inherently bad. And Layla Motley attempts to disrupt that notion, disrupt that myth, right? And just present teenage moms as regular people. Teenage moms just exist, and they are trying to do all the things that everybody else is trying to do. They're trying to graduate from school. They're trying to have and hold relationships. They have ambitions. They have desires. They want friendship. They want love. They want belonging. And so we follow this group, this collective of teen moms who have sort of created a support system for themselves that the rest of society couldn't create for them. And they support each other, and they learn from each other, and they take care of one another's kids. I mean, it is very beautiful. The story itself is told through the perspective of three of the teen moms. We have Adela, Emery, and Simone. And Simone was my girl. I absolutely loved her. And these three girls are all in different stages of motherhood, pregnancy. Them has to contemplate getting an abortion, terminating the pregnancy. So there is so much going on. I found it to be a very endearing read. This actually made me want to check out more of Layla Motley. And so when a book does that to me, it means it's a really good book. At number 18, I have Earthlings by Sayaka Murata. Now this one, listen, you need all of the trigger warnings. Please read your trigger warnings before you pick this one up. I was not expecting the ending. I wasn't expecting anything really that happened in this book, because it starts off very innocent and very childlike, and you don't think that it's going to go in the direction that it ends up going, but no, Earthlings is a really good book. I really liked it. It is another one of those weird girl lit fics, if you will. We are following along Natsuki, who is our main character, and she believes that she is an alien, and she has been sent down to planet Earth to report back to her master, who actually is a hedgehog, okay? Her stuffed animal is like her commander, if you will, and she believes that she's an alien reporting on all the Earthlings, all the happenings on planet Earth back to this hedgehog. And it sounds very innocent, very childlike, once again, like a game of imagination, if you will, but it's actually a lot more dark than that. Like, it's a lot darker than that. It is her survival fantasy. It's essentially how she copes. She is alienated. She's the dark sheep of her family. Her parents are just awful to her, and they are so sweet and so kind to her younger sister, who honestly is very annoying. But no, to Natsuki, they're absolutely awful, very abusive. When terrible, terrible things happen to her, you know, no one cares, no one believes her. She's almost like othered from her community and her family. It's very, very tragic. And so this survival fantasy that she began as a child to be able to cope, it transforms into an outright worldview. And she honestly truly believes that she's like not human. And after the very tragic events of her childhood, she becomes completely 100% committed to being non-conformist and not conform to society at large. The factory is what she calls society, and essentially the factory and society only places value on its citizens and on its citizens' bodies only if they are able to reproduce, get married, or produce labor. This takes place in Japan. However, I think that this book and the themes in this book can 100% be applied to any society, really. Lots of takeaways with this one. It is very gory, very graphic. Cannibalism, incest, sexual assault. There's a lot going on in this one. At number 17, we have Yellowwife by Sadiqa Johnson. It is very good. It is a historical fiction, but it doesn't read historical at all. I know that historical fiction can sound a little intimidating, but honestly, this was a very quick read, and Sadiqa Johnson's writing just pulls you in. Really, really good book. We're following Phoebe, who is a mixed race enslaved woman, and she is born on a plantation, and she comes with a lot of baggage. The circumstances around her birth are very, very interesting. I won't spoil it for you, but yes, she is a mixed race woman who has been promised a life of freedom once she turns 18, but there's a lot of things that happen, a lot of things transpire, and she is denied her freedom. She actually ends up at the most brutal jail for slaves, and in order to protect herself and ultimately her children, she becomes married to the owner of the slave jail. There is a love story that absolutely pulled at my heartstrings. I was a little annoyed with Phoebe though. Like, Phoebe honestly did annoy me at times. I did feel like there was a lot of plot armor, so at times the book did read a little unrealistic. I know that this was based on the true life of Mary Lumpkin. The ending absolutely broke me as well, and I want to read more from Sadiqa Johnson, so that says a lot. Number 16 is The Darkest Child. This might be the darkest book that I have on the list here today. The Darkest Child essentially is about a matriarch. Her name is Roselle, and she is the mother of 10 kids. Now, she is incredibly, so horrifically abusive. And she is abusive to all of her kids, but she is especially abusive towards Tangi May, who is the darkest child of the bunch. And a lot of her abuse is motivated by this intense colorism, and this really is about how racism and colorism and mental health really impacts Black families, especially during the Jim Crow era, 1950s Georgia. This story is not for the faint of heart. I definitely recommend checking your trigger warnings. There is a lot here, and I mean a lot. At times it did read a little bit like trauma porn, but I tried to look past the violence and try to understand what the book is trying to say. The book really is about the 10 children trying to escape the brutality and the horrors of life under their mother, but it's also about Tangi May trying to define what life can look like and trying to define the best life for herself. And so she wants to pursue an education. Her mother has encouraged all of the children to drop out of school in order to be able to take care of her needs. They are forced into sex work. They're forced into all these different roles, and it's tragic. It's really tragic to read about. But Tangi May wants to go to school, so it's really all about, you know, education as a tool of liberation. It's of course about racism and colorism and poverty and all those things, yes, but it's also about, you know, defining a life for yourself that isn't dictated by an abusive, monstrous mother. I mean, this mom is so evil. It is really hard to read. There's all sorts of things in this one, things that I can't even repeat on here, that defy humanity, that defy logic. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot, but I still found it incredibly important. It was written by Dolores Phillips, who died not too long after this book was published. And I can't help but think what sort of books and stories we would have gotten from her, because this was written so well. It is so well written, very beautiful. It reminded me of The Bluest Eye and I Know Why Caged Birds Sing. It's on that sort of wavelength. And number 15, I have The Berry Pickers. This was another really hard, difficult read, but very important, very necessary. This follows a Mi'kmaq family from Nova Scotia. Every summer they do travel down south to pick berries for the summer. This takes place in the 1960s, and that's very important because to a lot of Indigenous communities, the 1960s signifies the 60 scoop, and that's when a lot of Indigenous children were either kidnapped, taken from, or entered into the welfare system, or went missing altogether. And so in the 1960s, this Mi'kmaq family is going down south to pick berries like they usually do every summer. And the youngest daughter of the family, Ruthie, she goes missing and they never find her. And that's not necessarily a spoiler because the book is essentially about the grieving process, this family trying to reconstruct what life looks like. They've almost accepted the fact that she's never coming back. It signifies the historical trauma that the Indigenous community has inherited, almost like they're used to their kids leaving and at times never coming back. In any case, this is all about acceptance and grieving and trying to, again, reconstruct what life looks like, reconstruct your family, and try to move on from the disappearance of a loved one. And it is tragic, tragic. I think a lot of people need to read this book. It is beautiful. It is powerful. A lot of people on Goodreads wanted this book to be something that it wasn't. It's not a mystery. It's not a thriller. We're not trying to figure out what exactly happened to Ruthie. It is very clear from like the first half of the book, the first quarter of the book, it's very clear what happened to Ruthie. This is more so about a family grieving and trying to reconstruct life after the youngest daughter has been kidnapped and taken from that. At times they're successful at that grieving process, but more often than not, they struggle. They struggle a lot to cope. Definitely recommend this one. At number 14, we have You Weren't Meant to Be Human. Now, aside from The Darkest Child, this is the most darkest book on my list. It is a horror story. It is bodily horror. It is survival horror. It is cosmic horror. It is psychological horror. It is horrific. It is very, very intense. Trigger warning, trigger warning, trigger warning. You Weren't Meant to Be Human deserves a lot of time to actually be able to explain. But essentially, a trans man discovers that he is pregnant. And now he is days away from getting a legal abortion, but this book takes place in an almost dystopian like America. It takes place in a very fictional small town in America. It is an America that is close to total societal collapse. The rest of the country has essentially criminalized, abortion, so he can't get an abortion. And so this really is about like forced pregnancy. Now here's the thing, our main character is controlled by the Hive. The Hive is a cult-like entity, very disgusting, like it's a hive and it's made up of like worms and larvae. And because Crane, our main character, because he is so self-destructive, he has a low sense of self-esteem and he yearns for external destruction because of who he is and how much of a self-loathing individual he is. The Hive preys on him and they prey on people who essentially wish to self-destruct. Hive selects him. They force him to carry this pregnancy to term, and they do so in a very violent, intense way. I mean, we have forced confinement, forced gestation, forced pregnancy. The Hive, which is this like cult-like entity, right? They want him to have this baby because they need a new vessel for their own survival. And they have selected his pregnancy, his baby, as the vessel that will ensure their survival. There are so many themes and there's this sustained attention throughout the entire book. It's very eerie. It's very gripping. And if you listen to the audiobook, you will be absolutely mortified. It is not for the faint of heart. I really enjoyed it because I took away so many of the themes and I was like, whoa. The ending to me was all about freedom and all about bodily autonomy and all about agency. And this is the first time that the main character is actually making his own decisions. The choices he makes at the end is very brutal. Again, I don't recommend this to everyone. It is insane. It is intense. It is insane. But there's so much commentary on like the trans experience and bodily autonomy and survival horror and forced gestation and abortion, and it's just so loaded. Self-harm is a big one here as well. Please, please take care of yourself. Check your trigger warnings. Don't say I didn't warn you. I personally liked it. I do like horror as a genre, so there's not a lot that really spooks me out, but even this was intense. So at number 13, I have The Nickel Boys. The Nickel Boys is essentially about the Nickel Academy. It is an abusive reform school. This book is actually based on true events, the Dozier School for Boys. These abusive reform schools were operating for quite some time. It is something that not a lot of people know about. Boys, both black and white, were often sent to these reform schools to carry out their sentences for very minor offenses, mind you. At times, these boys were even wrongfully convicted and they were still sent off to these reform schools to serve out their sentences. And some of these boys never made it back. There was an immense amount of abuse, sexual, physical, you name it. But yes, this is a fictional retelling setting of like the dozier school for boys. Our main character is wrongfully accused. In this scenario, he is wrongfully accused and sent to this reform school. He meets up with another boy there, and together they have to survive through friendship, through other means. They are just trying to survive what is otherwise a chamber of horrors. This stuff is also very difficult to read, but it wasn't a 5-star read for me because the writing just felt a little bit too mechanical, and I wasn't able to emotionally connect with the characters as much as I wanted to, especially for a book of this nature. So that's why I didn't give it a 5-star read, but it is a really good book and I do recommend reading it, and the ending is absolutely going to leave your jaw on the floor. So it comes in at number 13. Really good, just missed the mark for me in terms of character development, but still so good, especially with the ending. At number 12, I have Best Offer Wins. On a lighter note, okay, I think we've had like 3 or 4 straight books of just horror and darkness. So this one is a lighter read for sure. I enjoyed it a lot. This is true, unhinged, unlikable female character vibes, and I loved every second of it. I have spoken about it in that video about thrillers, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But Margot is amazing. I love her. I don't mind my woman characters being unlikable. I don't mind when they're bitchy and unhinged and full of rage. I love it. I love it. Her motives are so realistic. I mean, all she wants is to be a homeowner, and she will do everything within her power to ensure that she becomes a homeowner and a mom. So I really like this one. It comes in at number 12. At number 11, I have Things We Lost in the Fire, and this was such a treat to read. This is like true horror, like horror at its best. It is a collection of 12 short gothic stories. It blends a supernatural horror with gritty social commentary on like Argentina's dictatorship, gendered violence, poverty, class. There's just so much going on there, and I absolutely loved it. It has a lot of like Latin folklore, a little bit of ghosts, a little bit of like true crime. I mean, it is so good. It's eerie, it's haunting, it's everything that you would want in a traditional horror. I wouldn't recommend reading this Halloween. It absolutely spooked me. There are so many bangers in terms of the short story. I don't like short story collections because oftentimes there's only like 2 or 3 short stories that I'm really like digging. But in this case, there were like so many freaking favorites, like The Dirty Kid, The Intoxicated Years, Adela's House, The Spiderwebs, No Flesh Over Bone. Like almost all of them were bangers. It was so good. It was so much fun. Mariana Enriquez is so freaking talented. I cannot wait to get into more books by her because this was just fantastic. Some of those stories absolutely left me speechless, and I was spooked. I was honestly spooked. It's one of those books that I don't recommend reading in the dark for sure. So yeah, this one definitely deserves the 11th spot. And now we are going to get into my top 10. The sun is almost coming down, so we're going to kind of speed through these ones a little bit. Okay, at number 10, I have Milk Fed. This is one of the books that I read for Pride Month, and I absolutely loved it. We meet Rachel and Miriam. Rachel is a secular, queer, Jewish woman, and she has made an entire religion out of counting calories. She has controlled, restricted, disordered eating. The funny thing is, the book never tells us how much she weighs, nor does the author give a very detailed description of what Rachel looks like, which I did appreciate. I thought that that was very clever. So again, she is on this like restrictive calorie counting plan that she actually learned and inherited from her mother, who is very controlling and has always tied Rachel's value to how thin Rachel is. And then she meets Miriam, who by all intents and purposes is very liberated when it comes to her body. She is plus size, but she's very comfortable in her own skin, and she's a yogurt girl. Okay, she works at like a yogurt shop, and Rachel goes to the yogurt shop every day and just loads her up with a bunch of frozen yogurt. It's so funny. Anyway, they begin a very queer relationship, which I loved to see play out. The ending of this is so sad. It absolutely broke my heart. I loved this book. I think that all of the themes that were tackled or handled in this book were done so well. She handles, for example, Israel and Palestine, right? Like Miriam's family is very orthodox, very conservative, and they are staunch pro-Israel, like staunch staunchly pro-Israel. At one particular dinner, Rachel is there to hold them to account and actually question them and have an honest debate about what's actually going on in Palestine. And I thought that it was handled so well. Nothing about this book feels forced upon you. It all just feels so organic. The tension, the relationship between Miriam and Rachel. Rachel longs for maternal acceptance, and she believes in a way that she's getting it through Miriam. She has fantasies of being breastfed, and it sounds so absurd. It's another one of those weird girl lip fic books. It sounds so absurd that she fantasizes about being breastfed, but I took it as like a symbol for that like maternal acceptance and maternal nourishment, right, that she didn't get from her mom. So she looks at Miriam and like fantasizes about being breastfed by Miriam. So it is weird, but it is very heartwarming. It is a very beautiful, tender read. I felt very funny as well. Like I was laughing out loud, like dead ass. I was laughing so much when I was reading this freaking book, and the ending is really, really, really sad, but I really enjoyed it. At number 9, I have Yellowface. I don't think that this book requires an introduction. It's a satire about the publishing industry and all of the racist dynamics within the publishing industry. This one was almost a 5-star read for me. R.F. Kuang is just so good at what she does. She is really highlighting like the process of colonization through the use of language. Everything that happens between June and Athena is an extension of like colonization. It's just happening through the use of language and literature, of course. And that's really what Yellowface is about. Again, no introduction. You guys know that, you know, June steals Athena's manuscript after Athena's untimely death in order for her to become the next literary star. It's fantastic. June is so unlikable. Like, I did not like June at all, but that's what made the book so fascinating. Literally to June, nothing is her fault, and all of her actions are always so justifiable. I almost felt like I was reading a narrative nonfiction. I annotated my copy of Yellowface, like I annotated the hell out of it. You will learn so much while you're reading Yellowface. It's one of those books that's popular for a good reason. At number 8, I read Aileen by Ottessa Moshfegh. This is a really good introduction into Ottessa Moshfegh, who is the author of My Year of Rest and Relaxation, Lapvona, and other books like that. So she writes weird girl lit fic, and arguably it's probably my favorite weird girl lit fic that I read this year for sure. I loved it. I mean, not much happens until like the last 25% of the book, but everything that comes before that, it really sets you up for those final, the final act of the book. It is so good. Our main character, Aileen, she's very perverse and disturbing and disgusting and weird. And in a weird way, I related to Aileen. And I think that a lot of people can relate to Aileen. She is living with this abusive alcoholic, father. She isn't the prettiest in the room. She's not the smartest in the room. She has all of these repressed desires. And the book is also very atmospheric, haunting, chilling. It will sort of like transport you back to the 60s. And you can't help but find Aileen to be somewhat charming, horrific, but somewhat charming. And it offers so much commentary on like identity and who are you really. I took it as like liberation, you know, everything that happens leading up to that final 4 chapters. It's Aileen looking back and being like, what is the moment in time that everything switched? And I loved it. I personally really, really liked Aileen. At number 7, I have Recitative. I've made a TikTok on this one. You can go ahead and check out that TikTok if you would like. I'll link it down below because I do go in depth on that TikTok. But essentially, Recitative is Toni Morrison's only published short story. So this is an excellent book to read if you want to get into Toni Morrison, but when you don't, want to spend a lot of time, or you want something that's a little bit easier to digest, easier to read, try Recitative. It is a short story. You're going to get through it really quick, and it's a very, very accessible read. With that being said, this was 100% like a mind-bending experience. Had me scratching my head, okay? This is all about reconceptualizing race, removing race as an identifier altogether, and all about the racial assumptions that we have either been normalized into believing, socialized into having, or the assumptions that we have inherited on race. And there's two young girls that we meet. One of these girls is black, one of these girls is white, but Toni Morrison does not reveal what the races of these young girls is. You don't know who is black and who is white. She drops like all of these Easter eggs to make you believe or think one way or the other, but truly it is impossible to know which one of these girls is black and which one of these girls is white. And it's just such a thoughtful experiment because you really sit there and be like, okay, I think this girl is black and I think this one is white, but why do you think that? It's just fantastic, very cryptic, very much a thought like exercise, if you will. That's what I felt like I was getting. At number 6, I have Stillborn by Guadalupe Nettel. This is one of my favorite reads of the first half of 2026. I cried, I held my heart. It was so good. It is all about two friends who have made a pact to remain child-free. Somewhere along the line, their ideas on children and family and marriage and everything like that, and what they want for their lives ultimately, go in different separate directions. Alina decides that she now wants to become a mom, and Laura, who is our main character and whose POV we get, she decides to remain child-free. Now, Alina, because she has decided to become a mom, she gets pregnant, and shortly thereafter, she is told that the pregnancy is one, not viable and may not come to term, and if she does give birth, she is going to give birth to a medically complex child. And so I know the title is Stillborn, so you're automatically going to think, you know, stillbirth, and I still do recommend checking your trigger warnings because it does deal with highly sensitive material that would be very triggering if like you've gone through abortion, termination for medical reasons, etc. and so forth. So check your trigger warnings, but it's more than just like stillbirth. This is really all about motherhood existing on a spectrum and the idea that women should have the agency and the freedom to choose and define what motherhood can look like for them. And so this is all about unconventional mothering, what happens and how do women navigate the unexpected moments that come from pregnancy or come with pregnancy, come with motherhood, because as we all know, pregnancy and motherhood oftentimes doesn't go according to plan. And so we see Alina and Laura navigate these very unconventional family dynamics. One of the things that this book does really well, it highlights that anxiety that you feel the moment that you become pregnant until you give birth. And if you're a mom, you're a parent, you know exactly what I'm talking about. As pregnant people, we're constantly in the state of anxiety until the baby comes home. And this book really highlights that anxiety. And in this book, the main characters are allowed to feel a multitude of emotions, be it resentment, fear, joy, happiness, regret, guilt. It is so well done. The writing is excellent, very bone-chilling in a way, very haunting, but at the same time, very heartwarming and raw and honest and just beautiful. It is a very good book. And it's translated from Spanish, which is excellent because I am trying to read more translated literature. With that being said, number 5 is another piece of translated literature. This is Minor Detail by Adania Shibli. In the summer of 1949, Israeli soldiers, they captured a group of Bedouins in the Negev desert. The story actually takes place a year after the Nakba, and that context is important. In any case, they captured a group of Bedouins. They killed almost everyone except this young Palestinian girl who they then kidnapped, tortured, gang raped, and murdered and buried in the Negev desert. And this horrific war crime that's actually based on true events that did happen in and around the Nakba is treated as like a minor detail. You know, for them, it's another day on the job. It essentially disappears from history. It's not until years later that a woman in Ramallah makes it her mission to ensure that the memory of this young Palestinian girl isn't forgotten and isn't erased from the archives of history. And so in the second part of the book, because the book is told in 2 separate timelines, the second timeline, we do follow the unnamed woman in Ramallah, and she's really trying to piece all of the details about this crime and try to bring it to light. It is so good. Very haunting. The hairs on your back will stand up, I swear. Some people struggle with this book because there is an absence of dialogue. It's told almost exclusively through the use of descriptors and description, and you might find that a little difficult to sort of read through. In addition, the first half is told exclusively from the POV of the commander of the Israeli army. For some people, that might seem counterintuitive, but for me, it was an excellent choice because you really got into the mind of the colonizers and you see the process of dehumanization of the Palestinian people. And you also see how genocide and war crimes is almost a matter of bureaucracy. To them, you know, colonizing and dispossession and erasure and all these things is almost logistical. Right? The first half from the POV of the commander reads very clinical, detached. It's very cold and haunting. What Adania Shibli does is that she centers all of these like minor details. So she talks about for like 2 paragraphs how the commander like dusts off sand off his knee or how he scratches his neck, which again might feel so insignificant, but he's doing all of this like minor things and caring about the sand on his knee and caring about the fly on his neck, while in the background there's a girl who's being brutalized. That alone is haunting. I cannot overstate the importance of reading about the Palestinian experience, but doing so from the perspective of Palestinian authors such as Adania Shibli, because this really is about life under brutal Israeli occupations. Fantastic read. It is very short. You're going to be able to go through it fairly quickly, but I do recommend sitting with this one a little bit because it will move you. It was instantly a 5-star read for me. At number 4, I have The Push. I have talked about this at great length almost everywhere because I absolutely love this book so much. It's essentially me in a book. This is all about the dark side of motherhood. Our main character, Blythe, she is constantly being gaslit because she believes that her daughter, there's something wrong with her daughter. She's always sort of wanted to be a mom, but the minute that she gives birth, she doesn't have that like innate maternal instinct or maternal connection with Violet. And this is told in a very interesting way as well, because Blythe comes from a long line of women who didn't necessarily want to be moms, but were thrusted into that position and they had to become moms. And we also see snippets of that history throughout the book. And I think that that was so brilliant by Ashley Audrain, because that almost forces you to question whether or not Blythe is just not a good mom. And maybe she has inherited all these terrible qualities from the woman that preceded her. And maybe she does have it wrong about Violet. Maybe Violet isn't a psycho after all. So it's this intense mind fuck of a book where even you as the reader are like, is this all in the mother's head, or is the child actually a psycho? And there is one event at the center of everything that absolutely will have your head scratching. I found this to be a phenomenal book, and it is a psychological thriller, but it honestly reads more like a literary fiction, to be honest with you. So good. One of my favorite books of all time. Coming in at number 3 is The Death of Vivek Oji. This one is by Akwake Emezi, and their catalog has been a catalog that I've always wanted to read. They just sound like a fantastic, fantastic author, and I'm so happy that I started with The Death of Vivek Oji because it did not disappoint. This one is all about trans experience, trans youth, particularly in Nigeria, and it is set against the backdrop of Nigeria's hostile, intense, socio-political, cultural climate. Our main character, Vivek Oji, they end up dead, and they end up on the porch of their mother's home, bloodied, their clothes are torn, and a lot of the book is spent trying to piece together the circumstances surrounding their death, especially through the perspective of Vivek's mother. She is on the hunt for the truth in terms of what happened to Vivek Oji. And in between that, we are getting numerous perspectives on Vivek Oji's life, truly who they were, what they were like, and their aspirations, their dreams, their identity, their yearning for belonging. It is all about Vivek Oji, really. This should have been called The Life and Death of Vivek Oji, because it truly is about the life and death of Vivek Oji. I just fell in love with all of the characters. It was a beautiful beautiful account of gender and sexual identity and family and culture and community, survival through friendship. But it's also a beautiful exploration of like grieving who you thought someone was. The more and more people come to find out who Vivek is truly, the more they have to grieve who they thought Vivek was. And so that is what stood out to me, you know, this idea that sometimes people may have not even died. In this case, yes, but sometimes people have not even died and you're still grieving who you thought they were. It is very, very good. 5 stars, automatically 5 stars. So good. And number 2, I do have The Bluest Eye, another one that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on. The Bluest Eye is just fantastic. It is perfect. To me, it is a perfect book. Oh my goodness. Pecola, she is a young Black girl who believes that she would be more beautiful if she could just have blue eyes. This is all about desirability, politics, and colorism and racism. Reminds you of The Darkest Child with everything that Pecola is going through. There are some heavy themes here. Another one where it's like, take care of yourself. The ending is absolutely tragic. The monologue at the end, it will stick with me forever. I love how Toni Morrison writes the children in this one. They're fully realized characters. They're not caricatures of children. They're actually human beings with like, you know, thoughts and emotions and contradictions. It is so beautiful. There's a reason why this is considered one of her best, even though it is her first book ever. Absolutely love this book to pieces. And at number 1, The Reformatory by Tananarive Due. What a blockbuster of a book. This is just brilliant. It is so good. I still think about it to this day, and I read it back like in April, and I still think about it to this day. This book is going to stick with me. It is a Southern Gothic horror novel. It does have all of the supernatural elements that you would be looking for in a classic horror novel, but the supernatural elements are, yes, ghosts and haunts, but horror really lies in the institutional and state violence that allows schools like the Dozier School for Boys to remain open and brutalize young boys. It is a fantastic exploration of like race, yes, but also all of the allies, right? The cautious allies. I mean, the way that she writes white characters is so complex and layered because she doesn't automatically default to the white savior complex, white savior model. The white characters in this are very messy. Their ethics are questionable, and that remains so true and so honest to that time period, because a lot of historical fiction novels, when they write white characters, they write them in these very templated white savior models that is just so frustrating to read. In any case, she writes white characters so fantastically in this book. More to that, our main character, Robbie, he's just a joy to follow along. All of his musings, his relationships, his friendship, Blue, Redbone. I mean, what a book. It is fantastic. The ending is beautiful and perfect. I typically don't like endings that are so neatly resolved, but it was perfect. It was the only way. I would have been so mad if it ended any other way. This made me look into the Dozier School for Boys. This made me want to know more. And even the author, Tananarive Due, she is connected to the Dozier School for Boys because when they were excavating the school sites and looking for bones of all of these missing boys that went to the school and never returned, one of the remains was connected to the author. It was revealed to her family shortly before she began writing this book that her great uncle attended Dozier School for Boys and was most likely stabbed while he attended school at that point in time. And so that inspired her to write this novel. And I am just so happy she did because it is just beautiful. To me, it is perfect. It deserves more than 5 stars. Please put this on your TBR. It is like reading through a movie, but you're never removed from the narrative. You never are detached from the narrative. It literally is just so immersive, so atmospheric, haunting. It's perfect. I love it so much. All right, that was my longest video ever. I started filming literally at like 2, 3. It is now 8. The sun is coming down. I do want to thank you guys for watching. Please let me know what your favorite books of 2026 so far have been in the comment section. I am always on the hunt for new recommendations. I have to film my nonfiction books next. That's going to be a much shorter video because there's only 26 books that I have to get through. There were literally like 42 books here. It's been a fantastic year for me. Majority of the books, I'd say, have just been nothing short of amazing. But yeah, I do want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Adios.